All right, we'll move into ceremonial items, and we have Mr. Greg Tucker, our Rutherford County historian, who's going to tell us a little history about Murfreesboro.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. You know, I just recently learned from someone a good bit younger than myself that these little history discussions are now appearing on YouTube. I don't really understand what that means, but they did tell me that apparently Councilman Shacklet does the numbers.
Thank you.
I believe that was about a year ago. Can you believe it's been that long?
Oh, my goodness.
About a year ago, we were talking about the fact of the founding of Murfreesboro, and we were 200 years old. The month of November is our anniversary month, so happy birthday again. We're now 201 years old as a city. November of this year also will mark the end of what's been a very difficult campaign season. And I have been asked, and I'm sure you others have heard things similar, can't we just get along? Based on our local history, the answer in Rutherford County and Murfreesboro is yes, we can. And there are many, we can even when others are struggling. And there are a number of good examples from very difficult times. And one difficult time is what we refer to as the Reconstruction era in most parts of the Southeast. The damage done by the Reconstruction era in the area of the economic and social aspects of life is equal to the physical damage of the war itself. But that's not the case in Rutherford County. At the initiative of a number of our local leaders, Rutherford County made rather extraordinary progress during this period. One such individual that I wanted to focus on is a fellow named William Doughtie, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y, another one of our unsung and unnoted heroes. In 1860, Doughtie was living in Indiana, where he was a very successful, prosperous merchant, attorney, a local politician. He was married, had 4 children. In 1861, however, he set aside all of his business interests, left his family, and joined the Union Army, the 35th Indiana Infantry, because he believed in the cause of keeping the Union together. He was given his age. He was 41 at the time. He was immediately appointed a captain and given command of a unit, and he proved very quickly to be a very aggressive out front leader. In fact, in the first year and a half of the war, he was wounded 3 times, and in each case continued to lead and was back in his position in a very short time. He did bring his unit to the Stones River battlefield, and during one over-the-top led by Captain Doughtie, he was severely injured. Injured such that as soon as there was a lull in the fighting, he was transferred to one of the makeshift hospitals. And when Bragg retreated with the Confederate Army, Doughtie was brought into one of the hospitals that had been set up in Murfreesboro, not expected to survive. He spent a year in the military hospital when the Rosecrans and the Federal Army moved south, leaving behind just a modest group. They took with them most of the hospital personnel. So Doughtie was then moved into a private home, and they looked to the locals to administer to him, still given very little chance of surviving. Amazingly, 2 years later, as the war was winding down, he was able to travel back to his home in Indiana. He resumed his business activity, but about a year later, decided to return to Murfreesboro. He sold all of his assets, sold his property, shuttered his business, packed up his family, and moved to Murfreesboro. Built a house which still stands on the northwest corner of Lytle and Academy, the Doughtie House, now covered over with stucco, but unique because it's so close to the street. He wanted to be where he could sit on the porch and talk to the people and the traffic on the street. He brought several things with him: an entrepreneurial spirit, an enthusiasm for this community, and a little capital. In short order, he had organized a local group and founded the only bank, post-war bank at the time, First National Bank of Murfreesboro, and began financing and encouraging the growth of industry, manufacturing activity in the area. He served as senior vice president at that bank for 2 years and then founded another bank, Stones River National Bank, which he was himself the chairman and president. And you hear names like Ransom and Earthman and Ledbetter. These were some of those that he financed and helped get them started. One interesting group was the Stones River Utility Works, a group of local businessmen who wanted to start up a cedar factory. They wanted to make buckets. And Doughtie financed their building and acquiring property and building their plant. He continued to encourage development. In fact, I'd say he was probably more than any other individual responsible for the industrial boom that put Murfreesboro in such a good financial condition in the 1890s. But the bucket factory prospered for about 5 years and began to stumble. Doughtie stepped up and bought the business, bought it out of foreclosure, and continued to operate it, and continued to finance others in the line of business. He also started a furniture manufacturing plant and several retail businesses on the square, and by the early 1880s was the largest private employer in Rutherford County, taking together all of his various businesses. In the mid-1880s, he turned over his business activity to his sons and engaged in his legal practice, was elected to the bench, served as a judge until his death. He died in 1889. The newspaper of the period describing his funeral said, quote, "One of the largest crowds we ever saw in Murfreesboro." The eulogy was delivered by a Confederate officer veteran who says, quote, "An energetic and public-spirited citizen, adding as much to the material prosperity of his adopted home as any man in it." This Yankee came down here and put Murfreesboro back on its feet and moved us along. We can all get along if we choose to, and if we make our common interest our special interest. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chucker.